graduated, elevated. Now it's my time to shine. Yeah, let's go. Major moves, power moves.
Hello, Rohit, and welcome to PhD Hard Talk. Thank you so much for wanting to talk about your research. Could you please introduce yourself, who you are, university, what your research is about, and then we can crack on.
Thank you so much, Noma. Thanks for the invitation. I'm Rohit. I'm Rohit Chakravarty. I'm from India, and I'm currently doing my PhD in Berlin. I study bats in the Himalayas, and well, I'm into the fourth year of my PhD, so hopefully next year I'll be done. Yeah, we keep our fingers crossed.
So, I'm interested in why the Himalayas and why bats.
Okay, so bats, because I'm interested in them. That's really just the personal. I mean, it was mostly out of personal interest. But you know, when you're doing research, you want to justify it to the larger world, to funders and everything. And for those people, I have the answer ready. That you know, bats are. There are different reasons for studying bats because they are really diverse. There are a large number of species of bats, even though we just see them as tiny blobs flying in the sky. There are a lot of different species of bats, and because my PhD is related to biodiversity, which we'll talk about later, I need a group that you know has a large number of species. And bats are interesting also from a number of for a number of other reasons. For example, they're really useful to human beings, which hopefully again we'll probably get to later. And the Himalayas, because the personal reason behind that again is 6 years ago when I first started working on bats in the Himalayas. I just before that I had done my master's project in the islands in India, which is you know there's a group of islands called the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So I was there, and then you know I just thought, okay, maybe I need a break from islands. What best can I do with you know where can I go next? And the mountains were a natural choice, and I've always wanted to work in the mountains. So again, that's the personal reason. The professional reason behind choosing the Himalayas is surprisingly, so apart from islands, mountains are another natural laboratory. You know, they are vast. And with that vastness comes a large amount of change in species in climate as you go from one elevation to another. So you know you can study a lot of processes of nature on mountains because you get this gradient of climate.
Yeah.
Different species colonize mountains at different points of time in the evolutionary history. So it's a great system to study how species interact with each other and how they might be affected by climate change in the future.
Okay, that's interesting. But then I've done a bit of research because I was like, okay, this is interesting. Bats. Who would research bats? Literally. So I did a bit of research just to get me together. And you know, I guess I've read a few papers, journals, and one of them, you know, highlighted the fact that bats, you know, they are the reservoirs of a lot of human viruses. And I'm thinking, you're looking at something different. And they've said, actually, you know, you can find a lot of viruses on there. Red, stay away. So, based on what I've just said there, why are you still researching bats?
Okay, because I think the fact that bats have a lot of viruses also makes it important to study them because you know there are two elements to this. The one that virologists mostly study is the diversity of viruses that exist in bats. What are these? You know how are these viruses existing in bats? How can they given the right circumstances, how can they spread into humans or other animals? And that the second component of it is where an ecologist needs to step in because we are the ones who are studying how bats, how different species of bats interact with each other, how bat species interact with the larger world. You know what kind of wildlife do they interact with? Under what circumstances could the barrier between bats and humans be compromised? For example, if bats live in forests, and if the forest dwelling bats are the ones that have a higher diversity of viruses that could be zoonotic, then where is it? How do we conserve them so that those viruses do not get transferred to human beings? And because zoonotic diseases, there's ample evidence, and we have this whole concept of one health, which basically says that human health is inherently tied to the health of natural ecosystems. If
Mhm.
both if both you if the natural ecosystem is healthy, then there's very less chance that the viruses will come in contact with human beings. So even though my PhD does not really deal with with this particular aspect of bat and human interface, that is something I actually can study in the long term, in the long run. But the point that I'm trying to make is that it needs somebody with an expertise in bat, not just in viruses or bat oriented viruses, that who who needs to step in order to to explain to the world why we need to conserve bats, A, and how we need to conserve bats so that our health is also not compromised.
Okay, interesting. So going back to biodiversity then, I've had this term since I started PhD hard talk. So when it comes to bats, could you please explain, because my knowledge is limited. So what does biodiversity mean when it pertains to bats? And what
Okay.
does it consist of?
Yeah, I completely know where you're coming from, because I was once talking to a historian,
Mhm.
and I kept using this term diversity very loosely, and I kept using this term colonization very
Yeah.
loosely. And for an ecologist, it means something completely different. For a historian, it was all about, racial diversity, some races being colonized by others, and then and I could see that she was very confused. In the case of when as an ecologist I say biodiversity,
Mhm.
there are different ways of quantifying it. The simplest way, the simplest, absolutely
Mhm.
simplest way is simply the number of species. So, for example, if we talk about the cat family, so in the cat family, we know there are tigers, there are leopards, there are cheetahs, there are pumas. So, these are all different species that belong to a family which shares and which shares a common ancestor or multiple common ancestors, and but basically they have evolutionary similarities. They have similar structures and all of that. And likewise, in the dog family, we have another set of species. So now when I'm talking about bats, when I say bats, it's actually a collection of different families, you know.
Mhm.
So there are plenty different families in bats, and what and when I say biodiversity, I'm talking about the number of species. So globally, there are over 1,400 species of bats, which is stark. I know that look. It's really stark.
Yeah.
And apart from that, biodiversity can also be measured in some other ways. For example, if you look at, I'll give you a bird example here.
Mhm.
There are hummingbirds. You know hummingbirds. They're tiny birds that keep hovering, and they drink nectar. Now, along with hummingbirds, there's a group of species called sunbirds, which are found in the. So, hummingbirds are found in the New World, sunbirds are found in the Old World. But they they're not evolutionarily similar, but they perform the same functions in the ecosystem. Even sunbirds are tiny birds. They hover, not as efficiently as hummingbirds, but they hover, and they drink nectar from flowers. So this element of diversity is called the functional diversity. So it's not about we're not dealing with species right now, but we're dealing with the functions that they perform. So two very different species, not sharing any evolutionary history, can
Mhm.
also perform similar functions in the ecosystem. So these are various elements of biodiversity, and this particular element I mentioned because that's also something I study with bats in the Himalayas.
Okay, so now I'm interested, and I'm thinking, okay, we're looking at bats in the Himalayas. What kind of bats are you looking at, and what are the pros and cons? As you've mentioned that, as you go up a mountain, it's different. What's the word? Amplitude, whatever. You use a specific word. And I'm
Elevation.
thinking, it's not coming to me. What word did you use?
Elevation.
Yeah, elevation. So I'm guessing certain temperatures, you have a certain species, I'm guessing. So, continue, Noma. You're doing great. So, in terms of all of those levels, what are the benefits of having the different species at different levels, and how do they then contribute to what's at the bottom of the mountain to make it better, basically, based on biodiversity?
That's a great question. And because it's a great question, and it will take multiple PhDs to answer that through and through, I'm going to leave you and the viewers with certain hypotheses.
Okay.
For example, okay, what are the benefits of being at different elevations? Now, the very first filter that an animal faces when it's trying to establish itself in a new area is climate. So if the climate is not conducive, there is very little chance that an animal will be able to establish itself in a new area. Now, okay, and the reason why I'm saying a new area is because, we're talking about things that happened millions of years ago.
Mhm.
What we see today, the animals that we see today, well, some of them have been moved around by people, and there are multiple examples of those, particularly in Britain. But apart from that, naturally occurring, most animals that we see in nature today, uh, they came into existence millions of years ago. So the first filter that they probably faced is the climate. The next is, the resources that they are looking for. For example, a hummingbird will not occur in a place that is devoid of flowers because it needs flowers. So, and different elevations offer different opportunities. And the reason why they offer different opportunities is A, because of the climate. So, the resources that are there, the plant species, the insects, they're all different. Apart from that, it's also a race among many different species. For example, if a really bully species found that the highest elevations are great, even though, okay, the elevations are, even though the temperature conditions are not conducive, the resources that occur there are probably nutritious. So the bully species went and lived on top, and because it's a bully, it did not allow the others to settle in there. So these are also other reasons why species organize themselves at different elevations. It's a combination of climate, it's resources that occur there, and also the the other species that may inhibit them from establishing in a place, or there could also be mutualists. So it's two species that actually help each other in order to survive and maintain viable populations. So all of these interactions are, and that's another reason why mountains are so interesting, because over very short geographical distances across elevations, you're seeing these patterns in action, and you can study why different animals are found at different places. So that's, yeah, I don't know if I answered the entire question, but just let me know if there's something missing.
Okay, no, I think you've answered it, and you answered it to the best of your knowledge, in the sense of that's the question that we're all trying to answer, essentially. So I think that qualifies everything that you've said. So in terms of the bats, then at different elevations, I'm thinking they need to eat, and when they do eat, they excrete, don't they? Where does that waste go, and does it actually benefit the ground or the surroundings within the mountain? Their diet.
Yeah.
How does it work?
So in my field site, so there are two main groups of bats. I mean, there are multiple groups, but in terms of diet, if you want to break bats down, about 70 to 80% of them eat insects, and about 10 to 20% of them eat fruits. So now, in my particular field site, we only have one species of fruit bat, but but in many other tropical areas, you have multiple species of fruit bats. Now, those are very interesting, and those are the best at answering your question, because when they eat fruits, they disperse the seed from one place to another. So and that is very important for the plant, because if a seed has dropped close to the parent plant, there's very little chance that it will grow into a big plant, because there's a lot of competition in that area. But if that seed is dispersed farther away, which bats are capable of doing, they're carrying the seed, they're eating it, and then another 20, 30 minutes later, they poop it at some other place. So they're giving that chance. They're like natural gardeners who are giving the chance to a plant to grow. And not only that, there are bats that also feed on nectar from flowers. So they are pollinating different species of flowers. So it's basic gardening, which is happening in a very involuntary way. Um, I mean, rather, it's happening in a voluntary way, but the bat probably does not realize the benefit that it's just doing to the society. Apart from that, the insect-eating bats, they um, they feed on a lot of insects. Some of these insects are actually pest insects, which affect agriculture. So they're doing a great service to farmers. Apart from that, where does their poop fall? Now, a lot of these bats live in caves. So in caves, thousands of them, millions of them sometimes congregate together, and they poop. And all of that poop forms like a mountain inside the cave. Quite disgusting if you think about it. But that's the sole source of nutrition for a lot of insects, spiders, and other kinds of critters that live in caves, because these insects are so specialized that if they leave the cave environment, they're going to die. So the bats are the ones bringing food to them. Now, how are they important to society, to nature? We will take a lot of time to find that out, but there's definitely, everything in nature has some role, and indirectly it might link to human health, economy, or something like that. Or maybe it won't, but that it's still an ecological marvel. And apart from that, but having said that, the cave bat, their droppings are also collected by people in a lot of places. For example, in Thailand, in Peru, in a lot of parts of Southeast Asia, predominantly. These droppings are collected. They're called guano, and the reason is that it's an excellent natural fertilizer. It's extremely rich in nitrogen and ammonia. So it's a great natural fertilizer, and people use it. So it's just another way bats help human economy.
Oh wow, that is actually interesting. And just outside of bats, I was on the internet as you do, and I was thinking, what is the use of flies? And I found out that they do the cross-pollination as well. I was like, oh my gosh, would have known. I think they're
Yeah.
disgusting, but oh my gosh, I need flies. So no, thank you. For your
No, and there's
response.
also growing evidence that bats control pests in chocolate plantations. So a major case to protect bats.
Literally, they just wave
And
banner.
they also pollinate the flower that produces tequila. So
We need bats. I think we do. During the summer specifically, we really need them. So going back to your research then. Okay, I think it's interesting what you've said. And I'm thinking, how does your research benefit the wider community? I mean, you've touched on, in terms of certain parts in Asia, they use the excretion for compost and it works. So I'm thinking, what else is beneficial to us globally that comes from bats?
okay, there are two parts to this question. The first part was, how does my research benefit? Is that the one that I need to
Yes, the
answer? Okay.
community.
Uh, Okay, so I'm not going to lie. My research is not. It does not have any direct conservation benefits, and I mean, I really don't want to make up conservation benefits for bats, because it is more. It is
Can I just
predominant.
say
Sorry.
thank you for your honesty?
I mean, because you're not
You
a
can
funding
continue.
agency, I can afford to do that. That's the next level of honesty, by the way. But so
Yeah.
I'm not going to cook that up, but I will say that it's predominantly an academic project which trying to understand why we see different species of bats in different parts of a mountain, and these principles can also be expanded with assumptions to the larger continent, or to a gradient of latitudes, because we see the same patterns that we see across mountains holding true across latitudes. So that is the thing. But if indirectly, I would list three main advantages of the project, two of which are professional, one is personal. The first is that uh, I mean, it's becoming increasingly important to study montane diversity, because you know it's going to be affected by climate change. Now, as the temperature warms, species from the lower elevations are going to move higher up. Species from the mid elevations are going to go higher up. Now, what happens to the ones that are already on the top? They can't go towards the sky. I mean, they can literally go to heaven, but but so that's a process that needs to be studied. How are these? It's only when we know what exists today that we'll come to know how things will change in the future and what kind of complications this might have for diversity at different elevations. Now, well, so that was one. The second, while I was talking, I forgot, but I'll skip to the personal reason, which is that doing these projects has taught me a lot about bats, and I've come back with field stories, I've come back with field experiences, actual experiences of handling bats and seeing how they behave, and that's taught me a lot about spreading the word about bats. I mean, if I was a lab rat analyzing data that was given to me on bats, I would probably never be able to tell the larger audience about bats and their benefits, about who they are, what they do. I also try to develop some content about, bat. I do a lot of bat uh, recordings in the field, the recordings of their sounds. Now that is very attractive to people sometimes when you slow them down, because these are calls in the ultrasound. When you slow them down and make people listen to them, so all of these things come from my field work, which are prime outreach material that is only possible because I'm studying bats. And because I'm studying bats, it makes people, it makes it, I mean, I become more believable in the eyes of people when I say that, we do not need to kill bats because they have viruses. There are other reasons. There are many different reasons to protect them. So this is, yeah, I would say that's how I feel about it.
Okay, excellent. And I guess in terms of, you've explained about your field work. Let's talk about your methodology then for your research. Could you take us through that? Why, what, and how?
Okay.
Just for
So
someone who's thinking to go into the same field as you.
okay. So, thankfully, my work involves a lot of field work, which is great. I mean, that's the most exciting part of my research.
Mhm.
So we work in different elevations in the Himalayas, and we try to get an estimate of the diversity of bats. In order to do this, we do two different things. One is we put nets out, which are these nets are like they're called mist nets, and they look like badminton nets, but they're much thinner. So and we put them along places where bats are likely to fly. So when they get trapped, we take them out, we identify the species, and we take multiple measurements, we collect certain samples that we need for the future. So we do all of this. Apart from this, we also put out ultrasonic recorders in the field. Now, the
Mhm.
reason behind this is that sometimes different species of bats call at different frequencies. So, and if we record those calls, we can identify which species they were, how active they were, and so it happens quite often that a lot of species you don't catch in the nets because they're flying really high, but they get detected by the recorder. So we use these two different methods to get an estimate of the diversity of bats, and then everything, all the other boring part of the work happens in the lab, happens in the office, and but fieldwork
Amazing.
is what an ecologist really looks forward to.
No, amazing. Thank you so much. And I guess I've got two more questions. You'd be glad to know because I think we've gone past our time. So, I've had this question. It was sent to me, and I didn't know how to answer the question essentially. So I'm asking everybody that comes on PhD Hard Talk. So, in your opinion, do you think that getting a PhD or a master's and getting a PhD or a postdoc does break the poverty life cycle?
Sorry, does break the positive life cycle?
Yeah, the poverty life cycle. Let's say, for
Oh,
example, if
poverty.
yeah,
Okay,
poverty,
okay.
sorry,
Yeah.
pronunciation problem.
No, 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 no. It's just a difference of accent. Sorry.
Yeah,
So,
let me work on that. So I'm so sorry, I do speak really
uh
quickly sometimes. But
okay,
poverty, yes.
okay. Yes, I guess it does. I mean, it's a hard question to answer.
It
You mean
is.
poverty, a person's poverty or the society's poverty?
No, 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 the person, the family. So you've got, for example, you see on Twitter,
Yeah,
TikTok, I'm first gen, it's amazing. But when it comes to, the funds, most people get a scholarship and then
yeah,
they're able to attain a job. And some people don't have that opportunity essentially. So I guess the question, it came from somebody who's thinking, okay, I really don't have an opportunity. If I could apply for a scholarship, I think I might be able to break the poverty cycle in my family.
yeah.
So I
I
guess
think,
that's why they said the question.
yeah. I mean, yeah, of course, it's a really important question, and I probably may not have a very optimistic answer to this. That and I say this more as an ecologist because a lot of people, well, globally, of course, PhD students are not known for being the best paid, and on top of that, a lot of people go on to most people in biology choose streams like medical, biomedical research, or things that have both an academic as well as an industry application. And ecology is one of those fields which does not have any industry
Mhm.
application. We either go into NGOs or we go into academia, both of which are not very well funded.
Mhm.
So I would say that as an ecologist, definitely I would say that if I mean, I never had to spend any money for my education
Mhm.
because I mostly studied through scholarships, and I think that is what I would suggest to everyone, especially if you're choosing ecology. Um, it's really hard to make. It is hard to make a career, and it is hard to make a very well paid career. So the best option would be to always rely on scholarships. And the reason why I started by saying that it's not an optimistic answer, A, because of this whole situation, but the other thing is as you grow higher the ladder, I think up to a certain point, it just keeps getting more and more difficult. After a PhD, getting a postdoc is more difficult than getting a PhD position. Getting a permanent position is more difficult than getting a postdoc. Once you've got into a permanent position, of course, it's probably relatively easier. I've not seen those days yet, but um, so climbing up the ladder definitely breaks the poverty cycle,
Mhm.
but you have to cycle really hard to get to that position. So I'm sorry, I can't be very optimistic about this,
So
even though I'm saying it
basically,
with a smile.
what you're saying is it's like bats. There's different elevation levels. The higher you go, you might end up in heaven,
Yeah,
or you might just be stagnant.
exactly. That's a very good way to put
I'm
it.
an expert in bats now.
I'm proud of you, Noma.
Thank you. The last question is, you know, I got in contact, I think, with you, and because I was interested in bats, and I thought it would be interesting to have a chat about them. So why did you agree to come on PhD Hard Talk? And do you think PhD Hard Talk is a good platform or a bad platform? What's your take on PhD Hard Talk?
You were right in assuming that I wanted to have a chat. So that's the first reason why I came here. But two, I've actually spoken a lot about bats in the context of why bats need to be conserved, and why they are not harmful despite the viruses that they carry and all of that. But to talk about them from a PhD context, to talk about them from an ecological context on a platform like this is rather new. And when I saw the videos, when you shared the links with me and I saw your videos, I was really interested. Your Instagram page looks like I described it in the same way to you. It's a one-stop shop for
Yeah.
PhDs. And this morning, actually, I want to make this comment as well. This morning, I was looking at some other videos for inspiration, and I came across this video by Alba, who worked on prostitution, on pornography and stuff like that. And I was really impressed by her video, and I thought, okay, wow, this is a great platform. This is a really good platform to talk about work and talk about your work as a PhD student.
Mhm.
So yeah, thanks for building this community.
Oh, thank you. Actually, that was insightful. I have to say, even I walked away with questions and I was like, this is interesting, literally. So that was a lovely chat. But not to keep you for any longer, I would like to say thank you so much for your time. Now, remember, if you want to get in contact with Rohit, his details are at the bottom of the video. Please make sure you email him if he doesn't respond ASAP. We're busy. Bear with us. We'll be in contact.
Or we're
So we'll
busy
see.
procrastinating. So
Yeah, well, we don't have to specify what kind of busy, do we? Or just crying. I have moments. When the data is just not communicating, I have moments. But to remember, hashtag project dissemination to the world, hashtag sustainable knowledge to the world. Let us share in love and share in peace. Thank you so much, Rohit, for your time. You've been wonderful. It's been such a pleasure. And who knew? Like bats, elevations. How about
no,
that?
thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Noma. Thanks for the invitation and for giving me a platform to speak on.
Graduated, elevated. Now it's my time to shine. Yeah, let's go. Major moves, power moves. Take it to the top one time non-stop.